Hi, I'm Kate Olson, and we're here on the Embrace Change radio website. I have my guest is Angie Lothan, and we're about to do a soul talk. And today we're going to talk about how art can facilitate creativity, decision making, and problem solving. It's not just, about creating beautiful or interesting things. So I'm going to let Angie introduce herself and tell you a little bit about her before we get started.
Awesome. Thank you. Hello, and thanks for having me on here. Um, my name is Angie. I am a transformational life coach, a facilitator of all kinds of transformative classes and workshops, an intuitive artist, and a Reiki master, healer, a mom, a friend, all kinds of things. There's so many things that we can label ourselves with, but those are some of my favorite and the things that really matter to me at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as the intuitive art piece, it's interesting because I did art. It's funny, I opened up a box with my daughters and my husband about a week or two ago, and we were going through all of these old things that my mom had given to me, and there was a lot of art in there that I had done growing up, elementary, junior high, and high school. And my girls were like, "Oh, Mom, you're a good artist." And I had, the sad thing was I turned that part of myself off after my senior year of high school. And I think that's probably pretty common for people to go take art classes and then be in this place where you're getting graded and judged and you're comparing your art with everybody else's. And at some point I decided I'm not an artist, and I wasn't as good as the people around me, and that I didn't know what I was doing. And so I gave it up altogether. So actually art just came back into my life about 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I had basically turned this part of myself off for almost, I would say almost 16 years. And I think I was still dabbling in creative projects outside of this. When I'm talking about art right now, I'm talking specifically about drawing and painting and watercoloring and all of that kind of stuff. But
yeah, that is really common. I did art in school too, and then didn't do it because, I thought, I have to get serious about something I want to do with my life. And, being an artist wasn't something I thought I was going to be.
Yeah.
That's interesting because that I did the same with both art and writing. And, I had ideas of what I wanted to be, but I never thought that my mom or dad really had any ideas of, what I should be. And then when I went to college and I decided to major in psychology, my dad one day said to me, he said, "Oh, I always thought you'd be an artist or a writer."
Oh, interesting.
And I was just like,
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Oh, and do you feel like you gave some of that up because you thought that there were other expectations of you?
Yeah, I actually started out college as an English major, wanting to be a writer, but that only lasted like the first quarter or so. Okay. When one of the advisors said to me, well, all of the professors here wanted to be writers and we're teachers, so, and it was like, well, you might as well give that up.
Oh, disheartening. Yeah.
And I was taking an interesting psychology course at the time, and so I just went in that direction.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anything's by accident, though. I think it always serves us in whatever capacity I did.
Yeah,
So
The
that's
good thing about things like art and writing is that you can always
come back to
connect
it.
them.
Yeah.
And like you, I use that
Yeah.
in other ways,
Yeah.
with, e-
Yeah.
even with my son growing up, um, he got the impression really early on that he just was not good at art
Mm.
from teachers, basically.
Yeah.
Unless
Such a
you were the best kid, they, you know, kind
just
of
didn't.
discouraged your efforts.
Yeah.
So he just didn't want to do it at all. Like he was the kid who didn't like coloring.
Yeah.
But
Aw.
then later in school, when they had to do projects and stuff, he knew that that art part of it was important, was
Yeah.
something that he wanted to do because he wanted to make his project stuff look
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And so I found that I could work with him and help him,
Mm.
that even though he thought he didn't have those art skills, that he could still create things that looked visually appealing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the fun thing about art is it's like unlimited. I mean, you can be creative and it's about self-expression and it doesn't have to look the same as everybody else's. And so when you have a project that maybe is a little bit more open, you get to sort of experiment and explore with that. And sometimes that in itself can be liberating when it doesn't have to look like everybody else's. So
Yeah, and then eventually he found that he had a sort of natural um, eye for photography. So,
fun.
but now, as a grown up, he'll just because of this big attitude he had as a kid,
Yeah.
he'll take those coloring things that they have in the restaurants or any place else, and he'll color it.
That's awesome. That's cute. That's sweet. Oh, that's awesome. Well, yeah, I think I started to remember what it felt like to play with art and kind of the purpose and meaning behind it when I became a preschool teacher. Which was back in like 2000, 11 or something, 2012. Um, I became a preschool teacher, and the thing that as a teacher I was constantly encouraging the kids and trying to remind the parents is that children learn through play, and to not put a lot of rules and boundaries and restrictions around them when they're in their play space. So if it was around the sensory table, a lot of parents wanted to keep it from being messy or keep them from mixing certain things or whatever. And I just kept on saying, this is their time to explore and experiment and to learn through play. Let them make messes, let them do all of that. And then in the art area, it was the same. And it was really challenging for a lot of parents who were like, I can't handle messes, and because they grew up with the message that we couldn't make messes. And also like, oh, it has to look this way and it has to be this way. And I said, no, we're going to give them the tools and we're going to give them kind of an idea of what they can do with it. But if they go outside of that and start creating something totally different, let them do it. Like, don't take that away from them. And the more I taught and reminded the parents this, and also gave myself permission to let go and to let the kids experiment and explore and mix and make messes, the more I thought, why aren't we doing this as adults anymore? We have lost this. And I think that is sad in a lot of ways, but I just felt like we've lost this in our life. And it is one of the things that I have somewhat held on to. I've kind of been the person who does like to experiment and explore and try new things and take chances. And I think I'm kind of known for that, but I noticed that a lot of people struggle doing that. And I noticed that a lot of the parents were struggling even, at the preschool, letting the children do that. And so I thought it would be really fun as kind of an experiment to offer a painting class for the parents of the preschool and help teach them to let go a little bit and to explore and to make messes and all of that. And because I was a parent and a board member before I was a teacher there, I was friends with a lot of the people on the board and some of the parents. And so I decided to host an intuitive painting class at my house. Well, actually, I should back up a little bit. When I was going through some things, I started to see a therapist because I was dealing with depression, anxiety, and chronic adrenal fatigue, and just had a really hard couple months there. And when I was talking to my therapist, she said, you know, you've got to bring some things back into your life that bring you joy, that's just for you, that make you feel alive and happy. And she said, can you remember what you did as a little girl that made you feel happy? And the first thing that popped in my mind was me sitting at a table coloring in a coloring book. And I said, art. And I was like, but I haven't done art or colored or drawn or painted for I don't know how long, you know. I've kind of played around with the kids at the preschool, but I've never done anything for me. And so I said, and the funny thing is, for the past 10 or 15 years, I've got this picture in my mind of this big canvas and this paint and multimedia objects that I want to put on there and something that I want to create, except I haven't given myself permission to go buy the paints and the brushes and the canvas and all of that, because I keep telling myself I'm not an artist. And so once I kind of talked through that with my therapist, I said, you know, I'm going to do that. And so it was around Christmas time, and I told my parents, my husband, they were all asking me, what do you want for Christmas? And I said, I want art stuff. I want paint and canvases and brushes. And that's what they got me. So I remember the very first canvas that I pulled out, I said, I'm going to do the same thing that I do with the kids. I'm not going to have any rules. There's no plan. I don't know what the final product or picture is going to be, because at the preschool, I would tell the parents, don't ask them what they're painting or what they're going to paint, because most of the time they don't know. They're just going up to the paint board to just experiment and explore and try some things out. And when we put that pressure on the kids, it can cause them to freeze up a little bit and be hard on themselves. And so I was like, maybe I need to do that with myself here. And so I kind of gave myself permission to not know what I was doing and to just play and experiment, and got my hands into it, and I got messy, and it was really liberating and freeing, and it felt so good. And that's when I kind of had the idea of like, maybe this would be good to do with the parents at the preschool. And so I had a friend who was an artist, and she loved intuitive painting and stuff. And I was having this conversation with her, and I said, would you be willing to facilitate an intuitive painting class at my house, and I'll invite everybody over. So we had like 10 women that came over to my house. My friend facilitated it, and I watched her do it and loved it. All the parents who were super nervous about it were able to kind of get past that discomfort in the beginning, and by the end they were like, this was awesome, this was so much fun, I've never done something like this before. And like people who had not picked up art supplies or tools or anything for 15, 20 years, you know. So that kind of sparked some ideas in me of like, how could I potentially take this intuitive art process and use it as a mirror or reflection of like how we're showing up in our lives. And when I became a certified life coach, I decided to blend the two and use it as kind of an embodied practice of seeing where we get stuck, where we stop ourselves, where we start playing small, where we start comparing, stopping, you know, all the things that happen in our lives, but it shows up on the canvas or on a piece of paper. But in an intuitive art class, it's a much safer place to take chances and explore and experiment without having, you know, the consequences of making those kinds of big choices in our life. And so it's a really good place to safely test some things out, but also know more about yourself in the process. And so I've loved combining the two and have had a lot of fun doing it.
That's what children get to do that adults don't get to do anymore, is they play. They take a situation and, you know, play it out and see
Yes.
happens.
Totally.
And adults are afraid to do that because it's real life and
Real life.
we
Very. And there's,
supposedly can't make mistakes,
yes.
but
Yeah.
of course we do all the time.
Yeah.
And
Yes, I love that.
so, so some people are better at it than others, but
Yeah.
most people, have a rigid, fairly rigid idea of what things should look like.
Yes.
And if they come up to something in their lives where they can't see the steps,
Yes.
can't see the process that something will take, that usually will stop them.
Yes.
And whereas kids that are playing, they
Are
don't
present
even
and in
think
the
about
moment.
that. They
Yeah.
just do the next thing.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. They're just present. They're in the moment. They're following their joy and kind of their gut and their intuition. And they're just, yeah, totally in the moment. Whereas I think as adults, we have that part in our brain that wants to know what's going to happen, that wants to, be able to predict the future and safeguard ourselves from any harm or uncomfortable situations or embarrassment or pain or whatever. And so we become so careful that it sort of takes the joy out of everything again.
Well, it not only takes the joy out of it, but, if we pre-decide how things are supposed to go, um, and we do have, sort of built-in biases, like a lot of times we're worrying about something that we think is going to go wrong.
Yes.
And so because we're spending so much energy worrying about that thing we think is going to go wrong, we actually go through the steps to create that
Yeah.
wrong event.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
So we're not totally cognizant that that's what we're doing, but
Yeah. 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 We're creating and manifesting the very thing that we're most afraid of.
yes, because people ask this question, how do I manifest things?
Mm.
That's a typical
Mhm.
question.
Mhm.
I'd like to manifest things. How do I do that? Well, you're doing it all the time.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Just by the expectations that you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what you need to do is change your mindset and your expectations,
Yeah.
or even just be willing to, experiment and
Yeah.
explore and see where things will go and
Yeah.
not be afraid of that, where
Yeah.
it will go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes people aren't even totally aware of what their mindset is and what's holding them back or what the blocks are. And that's why, I always tell people I'm not teaching art, I'm teaching you how to practice presence and um, play and experimenting and exploring and following your intuition and following your joy and enjoying the process and the journey, because it's less about the art and the final product, and it's more about the process and what's happening in inside of it. And I've had so many classes where people will be in the middle of creating, and I create a safe space for them to kind of talk about, like, tell me what thoughts are coming up, tell me what fears are coming up, so that we can talk about it as a group and everybody can hear, because you're likely not alone. And a lot of times people will go, oh my gosh, I just realized this is the thing that I always do in my life, and I didn't even realize it until I just heard myself say it out loud right now. And one person I remember, she was constantly asking for permission for everything, even though in the very beginning of the class I said there really are no rules. I'm going to give you some ideas and guidelines and some prompts, but you get to create this however you want. This is yours. There is no right or wrong way to do it, and really try to set them up for exploring and experimenting. But she was constantly asking me for permission every single time she wanted to do something. Can I do this? Can I take this color? Can I use this tool. And then I said, do you notice what you're doing? And she's like, oh my gosh, this is what I do in my life. And it just hit her. And I said, I want you to experiment with trying not to ask me for permission for the rest of this class, and just taking ownership for the things that you want to do on your own. You're an adult, this is yours. And you really can't mess up. And even if it doesn't look exactly like you want it to look by the end, you've learned things about yourself in the process. And it doesn't have to be something that you hang up on your wall. It may just be that you're here to explore and learn more about yourself. And can you let go of needing to be right and needing my permission all the time? And so that was huge. But there's all kinds of things that'll come up that people are like, oh my gosh, I realize I do this in my business. Oh my gosh, I realize I do this in relationship. Oh my gosh, and they didn't even realize until they were in that process of creating with art, whether it's painting or drawing or watercoloring, because it's really not so much about the medium that we're using, but more about just the process of creating. But like, oh, okay, I see what I've been doing. And then they get a safe place to explore trying to do something a little bit different, and noticing what the effects of that are. And a lot of times people are like, wow, I feel so much more free. And I've talked to people after the classes later on, and they're like, you have no idea how that shifted things in my business. Like, ever since that class, I've done things totally different in my business. So it's really insightful and a fun way to explore ourselves, because I think doing this personal development and learning more about ourselves and kind of going deep and understanding all the limiting beliefs that we live with, all that kind of stuff, can be sometimes heavy and hard and frustrating. But to do it in community with other people and in a playful setting where it's with art and color and feeling kind of childlike again, and talking about things and realizing that you're not alone and you're not the only one who thinks these things or goes through these habits or whatever, is really liberating in a different kind of way.
Yeah,
So
there aren't a lot of mediums that adults can feel comfortable in exploring all of those things. Like, a lot of the things that we do, even for play, get pretty serious, like sports.
Yeah. Yes, very competitive.
Sports can be a good outlet.
Oh, totally.
A lot of times it does get that seriousness to it, that competitiveness.
Yes.
That, makes it not so fun anymore.
Yeah. And I think, anything in life, right, can be a mindfulness practice. Yoga, hiking, like you said, sports, all that kind of stuff can be a practice where we get to let it be a mirror for us about how we're showing up in our life. I think the thing that I like about the art part is that it's a place where you're creating and not just playing, because there's, I think, so many parts of our life where we have opportunities to create and we're not, because of whatever all the fears are, whether it's your business or whether it's
failure, ideas about expectations of what other people are going to think.
Exactly.
Having a set idea of how you're supposed to do something.
Yes, there's a right way and a wrong way, and it has to look like everybody else's, or it's not good enough, or what are other people going to say, or are they going to judge my work, or whatever. So I think it's especially helpful for people who are doing creative work, but really it doesn't matter. Anybody can use it, to just be reflective on how it shows up in your own life. And people could do this on their own. They don't have to take an intuitive art class with me or anybody else. They can literally just get a piece of paper, some markers, crayons, whatever, and just tell themselves, start playing, and then see what happens. See the thoughts that immediately come up with, like, oh my gosh, what's the first step I should take? Or, oh my gosh, I need to know what the final picture is going to be before I start. Or, all the things will start coming up. And if you can capture those thoughts quick enough, even if you just write them on paper and just say like, these are the things that come up in my life. These are the things that hold me back from playing, from experimenting, exploring, creating, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's up to, people can do it on their own. What's also really fun is doing it in community, because one of the things, and I don't usually give people a heads up on this, I like to push people to the edge a little bit, so to the edge of their comfort zone. But a lot of times when we're doing an art piece in the middle of the class, I'll say, okay, how do you feel about switching your art piece with somebody next to you? And a lot of people will freak out at that point. And what's really interesting is that most people are less concerned about other people building on what they already started. They're more concerned that they're going to mess somebody else's up. And so then we get to talk about that, and we get to talk about collaboration and working together and starting something and letting it go and letting somebody else take over and building on that and all of that kind of stuff. So it's just
those are all difficult and pertinent things.
Yeah.
We do have, fairly strong and definite feelings about things like that.
Yeah. So it's fun. It's definitely a way for a creative, playful way for self-exploration.
That collaboration type of, that would be good to do at companies where people have to
work together
and collaborate a lot.
Yeah. I definitely dream about that all the time, of coming into companies or organizations that are working with teams and doing something like that.
Yeah, because even if you want to and think that you have good skills in collaborating, you may still have a lot of those ideas. And I have, I've come up against them in myself.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we all have them. We all have our, patterns of thinking or limited beliefs or whatever that hold us back or create, maybe some conflict in relationship or
if you're doing something creative and you have that idea of how you want it to be, how you want it to look, how you want it to turn out.
So you don't want to hand it over to somebody else.
Yes, but if you're collaborating and you need to do that for the other person to have some input, it's a hard process.
It is.
Let that go and actually let them be. Put their creative input.
And that's always the most beautiful part, is even though that part feels so scary in a group where like, oh, I don't want to mess somebody else's up, or other people like, I don't want anybody to work on mine because I already had an idea of what I wanted to create. Once we actually switch and people start working on it and they actually get going, by the end of the class, I mean, I've never heard anybody complain. They've always said, wow, I would have never considered adding this to my picture, and this has completely changed it in a really awesome way. Like, this looks amazing. I don't think that way, or I don't draw that way, or I don't paint that way. And so yeah, it's really fun to watch when people get to bring in their own sort of flavor of creativity and add it to somebody else's and see what happens. And almost always it turns out awesome. Like, I've never had anybody complain about that.
Even though it is hard to come up with that collaboration, really, where
scary, uncomfortable.
It usually does produce, like you said, an awesome outcome if it happens. Sometimes it will happen, kind of accidentally or spontaneously, where you don't have to go through that pain process.
Right. Or
So,
somebody's
so,
pushing you
so
to do it.
that kind of lets you know that if you could do this, it would be awesome.
Yes, yeah.
But then when you set out to do it,
Yeah,
and you come up against those
the challenges or
feelings,
differences.
boundaries,
Yes, all the things.
and you realize that it isn't always an easy process.
No, no, it definitely isn't. And I think that's a whole nother thing. That's I think
But I
when
think very valuable in learning how to do it
yeah,
um, more easily and
yeah. That's where I think skills in conflict resolution and compassionate communication and all that kind of stuff helps to learn how to listen to somebody else and really hear what they're saying and reflect and set boundaries, ask for what you need, all of that kind of stuff, which we all I don't feel like grew up learning how to do, and I am just learning how to do that as an adult. So it's another skill that I think is really valuable in the workplace, and not a piece that I have made a part of the intuitive art classes that I facilitate, but it's definitely a valuable piece and something to think about because I've done a lot of studying and internship in compassionate communication, and I think it's a really valuable tool to have. And it takes a lot of practice because it's not our natural go-to to interact or talk in that way.
for a lot of people it isn't.
No,
The more empathy you have, the easier it is, but still sometimes.
Yeah. It's just, yeah. I mean, even I think for the people who are compassionate and empathetic can still struggle in how to speak about their needs or, work through conflict or even hear somebody who has a different idea or opinion or, whatever. So,
Yeah, it's interesting. People that are very compassionate and empathetic, sometimes what they have the most problem being compassionate with is themselves.
yes. Oh, totally. Exactly why I do what I do. Yep. Yep. Totally. Yeah. So I don't know, um, with you and your coaching and working with clients and stuff, how, like what comes up for you. But I know, like in an intuitive art class, what happens a lot is fears, right? Fears of the consequences or the judgments or the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And those are opportunities for some coaching and just saying like, what is the worst that could happen? And, is this bringing up a memory of something that has happened similar to that you think is always going to happen from now on?
That did happen.
Right. What's that?
Like sometimes we have those fears from when we were a child, and this consequence that would happen to a child, but
Right.
you're an adult now, and
Right.
that's not going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
So, in
And
most cases.
right. So we got to retrain our brain with that to give ourselves the permission that we need and the compassion
And it's sometimes hard to move out of that if you've had traumatic or just strongly imprinted like when I was in college, my roommate and I had some roommates that we didn't know, and they would fight all the time, and one was actually quite a bit older, but they acted like children. And one day I came into the apartment, and in the middle of the hall there was a chair sitting. And when I moved the chair out of the way, there was an iron imprint on the rug. And so, we asked, how did this iron imprint get here? Well, we don't know. and they wouldn't, say what happened or fess up to it, till finally one of them tattled on the other one.
Oh, wow.
And so then it was like, so why didn't you just say, I dropped the iron and it damaged the carpet here, and
Yeah.
well, we were afraid you'd be mad.
Yeah.
I'm not your mother.
Right. Right.
What you need to do is talk to the
Yeah.
apartment owner,
Landlord or whatever. Yeah.
see what you need to do to compensate for those damages.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she was strongly, I don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah, totally. And I can relate to that, because that was like my pattern of thinking for years, and still sometimes I run up against that. I don't want to get in trouble. And that is a very common thing, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, but to keep holding on to that fear when, okay, yes, we do have to take responsibility, and there are consequences for things sometimes. But it's not the same as when you're a child and trouble for.
No. And, another thing that I've had to really get more comfortable with is conflict. Like, I think we're so uncomfortable with conflict and so afraid of it. I'm not speaking for everybody, but a lot of people that will do anything to avoid conflict. And I know this has been a thing that I've had to work through. And so I've had to teach myself to get comfortable with conflict and know that people have permission to get mad and angry. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm in trouble or that it's about me or whatever. They're reacting from their own perspective or viewpoint or whatever it is that's triggering something in them. But that's hard, and it takes
practice. Conflict is hard, and so is anger. Either it's hard for people both ways, either to have it,
be on the receiving end or to experience it.
Or to get angry.
Yeah,
and
totally.
That's, it's just not pleasant, but it is part of our lives.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So yeah, one of the things that I like to talk a lot about in coaching and the intuitive classes and all of that kind of stuff is, as adults, and it sounds like it's kind of what we're talking about, that we have to get more comfortable with being uncomfortable and not so afraid of it. Because I think we do everything that we can to stay comfortable and to avoid anything that might embarrass us, or where we might get judgment, or where somebody might not like us, or where it might create conflict, or anything that we kind of keep ourselves in this little protected bubble, and we lose a lot of opportunities to feel our aliveness and to explore and experiment.
And navigate in the world, if you can't stand up for yourself in the workplace, or you can't go ask for that raise that that you deserve.
Yeah.
Or you can't tell the coworker that's, doing something that is driving you nuts. Things like that.
Yeah. We got to get used to being uncomfortable. Just is what it is. I mean, the world is always going to be a little bit of good and bad and comfortable and uncomfortable and everything. And
well, our times have also kind of pointed out how easily intimidated or coerced people are.
Yeah, fear is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
So people know how to use it when they want to get something, and that can be dangerous and hard on all of us. Because
Yes, because I think some
exhausting to
people
live in
are
fear.
actually not comfortable with thinking for themselves.
Yeah.
You know, like they kind of take the consensus opinion because, you know, they don't want to.
Want to go outside of the box or explore if there's another way of doing things, or I mean, all kinds of stuff comes up around that, but I just keep relating it back to art, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's, if I taught a class with adults and said, you know, this is what you have to do, these are the parameters that you have to stick within, this is the picture that you have to create, it cannot look any different, these are the colors that you have to use, and you know, if you go outside of that, if you mess up, if you make a mistake, if you know, you decide to experiment and try something different, then, you know, these are the consequences. And if I taught a class like that, the response and the way that people would show up would be so different.
It would be. There
More
would be some people that would be really comfortable with that.
That's so true, actually.
There
That
would
is
be
very
some
true.
people that would be like total rebels. And they
Yes,
would,
that is so true. There are some people who definitely don't like the freedom. They want a lot of container setting and rules and a clear path and a clear picture. And so it's true that for those people, it's very uncomfortable. And that's why I like to have them kind of push themselves out of their comfort zone a little bit in a place that's safe, where they don't have to go out and do it in the world yet, right? But they can do it here, and just say, like, what would happen if you didn't have that really clear container and this, you know, path and clear picture, and you just gave yourself permission to go within, follow your intuition, follow your own joy, follow like what would make you feel most alive and most authentically expressed in this you know, art class today, instead of trying to fit in and do it right and do it perfect and not be outside of the box. And I know that's super
yes.
uncomfortable for people,
Well,
but
I can see how the intuitive art would be a good tool in helping people that are dealing with anxiety, because they've put very rigid parameters on themselves usually.
yeah, and especially in a time right now where everybody's like, we don't have the predictability. We don't know what the end of the year is going to look like. We don't know what we're even doing in our lives right now. People are like, what am I supposed to be doing? Where am I going? What am I? But you kind of mentioned in the beginning of this conversation that sometimes all it takes is just taking the next step in this moment and seeing what unfolds, and trusting that everything is going to unfold the way it's supposed to.
Yes, and that is, if someone can be in a setting where they can do that and feel safe.
Yeah.
Because usually they're too afraid.
Yeah. And so what do you think helps people move through that fear in settings where they are afraid?
Well, the only really real way is that you have to do it.
Yeah.
That you have to face that fear and do it.
Do it. Take action. Yeah.
Because whatever it is that you're imagining will happen.
Yeah.
Usually isn't going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. We can sit a lot in our thinking mind, trying to plan everything out, trying to predict, trying to keep ourselves safe, you know, worrying and creating a lot of anxiety. And nothing happens there.
Monster or imagined
right
consequence is usually way more scary than
totally
reality.
Yeah. And what I have always experienced myself, and what I've heard other people say too, is it was more scary and uncomfortable sitting in that place of question than actually taking the action and moving through it. Once they do it and they take the action and move through the thing that was scaring them, they're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And it was actually worse to just be in that space where I wasn't taking action and just thinking about it and having all that anxiety.
Yes.
That was the most painful part.
It's not only worse because, because of the feelings that you're imposing on yourselves while you're staying in that space so long,
Right.
but you prolong that.
Yes.
Totally.
Totally. That uncomfortable feeling. And yeah. So you can just take action. May not be perfect, might be messy, might not turn out the way you thought, but you take it, and then you don't have to sit in that anxiety anymore. You get to see what worked, what didn't, what you want to do different next time, and learn from that. So yeah, I think I will be offering some classes online and stuff, and I hope that what people will take away from it is, well, for one, a sense of community, because I feel like we're all missing connection. And one of the things, I talked a little bit about depression myself today to my community. And one of the things that makes people feel, well, when you're feeling depressed, you feel alone and isolated. And then you tend to isolate even more because you don't want to reach out to people, which then just amplifies your depression. And I hear a lot of people talking a lot about having depression and anxiety at this time. And I think one of the antidotes to that is having connection and being a part of a community and seeing that you're actually not alone and you're not the only one. And being able to talk about it and talk through it helps to sort of create distance between you and whatever it is that you're struggling with, whether it's fear, anxiety, or depression, or whatever. Then you're not as attached to it. It doesn't become who you are. It's just, oh, this is what I'm noticing is happening to me. And so I hope,
even realizing that you can, kind of be outside yourself and observe, instead of actually being in those feelings.
And that's, I mean, I ebb and flow between being able to do that and sometimes not. And,
when that is the thing that people that don't so much suffer from depression don't realize about depression is it isn't always this analytical thing that when you're in it, your thinking isn't going the same way as when you're not.
Right.
You can't always, like reason
way out of it.
It's you're feeling this, and you're very sure you're feeling this. And
very sure it's all real and true, and it is what it is.
There's somebody to tell you, well, just do this or just do that. Not that easy.
No, it's not. So I hope that, whether it's a class with me or whether it's, anything, like I said, it doesn't even have to be art, right? It could be some other process, yoga or exercising or dancing or sports or whatever, cooking, that can be an opportunity for reflection and just to kind of question and ask yourself, like, what are the thoughts coming up right now? What are the fears and the stories that I'm telling myself? And where else do I do this in my life? Because I kind of think like how you do anything is probably how you do everything. So if you're doing it and showing up in this way, in this space, it's probably somewhat reflective of how you're showing up in other spaces. And so,
it's
patience is just
very
required.
Good for showing you your kind of mirroring to you your thought processes. Like
in a lot of times, gentle way.
People know they want to make certain changes in their lives or accomplish certain things, and it's just like they have no clue how to go about it. And the process of finding that has a lot to do with knowing yourself and
Yeah.
knowing
What are the blocks and the things that are
yeah,
keeping you
and how you think.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if you like come up with that fear and anxiety every time you get to a place where you can't see the steps in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you know that, then it isn't so scary when you get to that feeling.
Yeah. You can recognize, oh, here I am again. This is what
Yeah,
happened.
and you can explore options then.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you don't even know, it's kind of like, oh, you're just coming up with that feeling and it doesn't feel good, and you just want to.
You're believing the thoughts and all the things. Yeah, totally.
So,
Yeah, I love it.
so as usual, we could probably talk about this for a long
Totally.
time.
Yeah, I'm like, there's so many parts of
Yeah,
this.
there's a lot of different aspects to it, but soul talks are meant to be reasonably short.
Absolutely.
So is there one last thing that you would like to say before we go?
Sure. I think just because of the times that we're in, just a reminder to be gentle with yourself, kind to yourself, and um, just take one little baby step at a time, even if that's all you can focus on and do at the moment. And we'll get through this.
A lot of uncertainty, and
Yeah.
nobody knows all the answers or
No.
really what tomorrow is going to look like. Or
Yeah, and stay connected to somebody. Even when you feel like you can't or don't want to reach out to people. It's not only helping you, I think it helps the people that you reach out to, because I think they're probably in the same boat. It's like,
yes,
people are hesitant to reach out to one another, but I think we all need it. So reach out.
good advice. So thank you for being here today and talking about this. I think there's a lot of good that can be accomplished through art and creativity.
Yeah, I do too. I think we're all missing a little bit of play and color and childlike, stuff in our life. So if you can get your hands on it, go for it.
So I'd like to thank the listeners. I hope you got something out of it, and maybe you'll even want to try and see where it goes.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Kate.
I'm just going to say bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.